Hey everybody, this is Angelo Villagomez with the Center for American Progress. I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of Under the Pala Pala. I'm from the island of Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands in Micronesia, and a pala pala is a small traditional structure that we have on our farms where when we've been out on the farm all day, we've been working, we come back to this structure and we make our lunch and we sit down and we talk and we laugh and we sing. And this video series that we're producing right now is in the spirit of the Pala Pala. And with every episode, I'm going to introduce you to new conservation leaders who are working all across the United States on different initiatives to protect the ocean. In our first episode, I'd like to introduce you to two Indigenous women who are working in ocean leadership. I'm very lucky to have both of them on the show today. Not only are they leaders in their community, but they are leaders in the United States and across the world. I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Sheila first. Representative Babauta, if you could just go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Hafade Tiro Kesalelia Menko. My name is Representative Sheila Jack Babauta, born and raised on the island of Saipan, and we are located right next to the Marianas Trench, deep in Northern Oceania.
Sheila, thank you so much for joining the show today. We're really excited to have you on. Now I'd like to introduce our second guest, Chairwoman Violet Sage Walker. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Haku. My name is Violet Sage Walker. Haku is hello from the Chumash people along the central coast of California. I'm the chairwoman for the Northern Chumash Tribal Council and also the nominator for the proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, which is in the final stages of designation right now. The Chumash territory and the Chumash people stretch from Malibu all the way to Big Sur, inland to the San Joaquin Valley of Bakersfield and Fresno. And our territory encompasses over 200 miles of oceanfront coastline, and we're a maritime culture.
So I want to ask you, back at home, what does conservation success look like in your community?
The truth is I don't know what it looks like. We've never really had a good holistic model of conservation. And I say that with the deepest respect to all the work that people are doing around the world and locally. So I honestly think that I've never seen what a holistic approach, and like my father said, former chairman Fred Collins, he said that we need to do away with sustainability and forget that idea, flush it down the drain, and think about thrivability when we need to think about conservation as a whole, that we're all connected. And so an island of conservation doesn't mean much when right next to you have a great big polluter and a bad actor on the world stage.
I love what Violet stated earlier, and thank you for sharing thrivability. And a holistic approach is something that we're also hoping for in the Mariana Islands. In the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, we have 7 marine protected areas. And for a place with a population of about 50,000 people and a landmass of around 185 square miles, that's pretty impressive. However, we've identified that there is a disconnection between the average community member who has a very intimate connection with our environment and those who are in the conservation arena, scientists, marine biologists, government workers, politicians, and that disconnection continues to grow. So success for me looks like having everyone involved, even if they aren't directly tied to conservation in the colonial sense. But just like Violet, we are working towards a more holistic approach so that we can thrive together.
Yeah, it's really interesting you talk about that holistic approach. Now, you've been working in conservation for a long time now, Violet. How long have you been doing this type of work?
Well, both my parents were pretty hippies, so I've been born into conservation here. I'm the 3rd generation to work on preventing the offshore oil platforms here in Santa Barbara. the environmental movement began here on the Central Coast in response to the 1969 oil spill by Unocal in the Santa Barbara Channel. I was born into an environmental movement. What Sheila also mentioned too is the disconnect too between the conservation, because people speak different languages, and the conservationists also speak different languages with the Indigenous people, and sometimes we're not all on the same page. So the conservation movement has not always been aligned with Indigenous cultures and Indigenous people. So I would say that I first came into that aspect of conservation just in the past decade.
And do you think we're getting better at that? What is the trajectory?
We're getting better. When you read America the Beautiful, some of these new policies put out by the administration and 30 by 30, and the apology for the governor of the state of California for the mass genocide against the Indigenous people in California, you see some of these benchmarks that we never thought we would see before. And frankly, you see people talking now about stuff we've been saying for the last 60, 70, 80 years and multiple generations about taking care of our earth and taking care of Hutash, the great Mother Earth. And so people are saying what we're saying now. And so we're starting to speak the same language and use the same words. And so I see that as a huge step forward.
Yeah. And, I can see the way that you've paved the way for some of us who are newer to the space. And Sheila, you're relatively new to conservation, but how long have you been doing this kind of work?
I was raised by a family of farmers, fishermen, and women and hunters. But I've learned so much more in my role as chairwoman of Friends of the Marianas Trench and as chairwoman of the Natural Resources Committee in the legislature. I have grown up thinking that conservation really meant taking care of the environment around you, taking only what you need, nothing more. And if you do have more, you share it with your family, you share it with your neighbors. And as I got involved with the work, I now have a better understanding of how we're all connected and how there are major threats around us that our community and our leaders are not always aware of and keeping track of because there are so many. And that's really moved me into the space of representing our islands in a regional and international platform. And so I see how the Indigenous voices are now elevated, and I see how the Pacific region is getting a lot of attention. And really, this is our moment to advance ourselves and the conservation efforts that we want to see, because like Violet said, we now share some of the same language, but there are still major barriers around even terms like a sanctuary that may mean something different for a federal government agent as it does to my community. So there's still a lot of work to do. And, I'm very excited that a lot of our youth are getting involved and very passionate about it. It's heavy work sometimes, but it is something that we cannot ignore because it is our livelihood, it's our home, and it's something that is deeply connected to us as human beings.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan, though. We're going to educate our leaders, we're going to bring the kids in, and we're going to use our Indigenous values and move towards those. Violet, you've been doing this type of work for years now. Can you just tell me about your proudest accomplishment in conservation?
We have a sacred site here, Le'isamu, which is Morro Rock here, Morro Bay, California. And about 140 years ago, the Army Corps of Engineers started blowing up one of our sacred sites. And it was at the same time that there was a bounty on California Native people. So we weren't able to stand up and protect our site, and we weren't able to have a voice. And 140 years later, the Army Corps of Engineers over the weekend returned some of our rocks to us, and we'll be returning almost 10,000 tons of removed material to us. to make underwater habitat and fish habitat and eelgrass habitat. And so we brought the community together in a celebration of what I call Reunite the Rock. And it's a very symbolic, meaningful time to us about how our people were similarly blown up and disconnected and scattered around the community. And the same thing happened to our sacred site. And so reuniting our people and healing our hearts and healing the wounds that have been inflicted on our community. Last weekend was a very powerful event. And it was a relief for me, and it took a lot of weight off my shoulders because that was something my father had asked me to do before he passed away.
Violet, thank you so much for telling us about that powerful story. You actually may have given a little preview of our second episode of Under the Pala Pala, because we're going to bring Mike on and we're going to talk about the event that you just had. Sheila, do you want to bring us home and just tell me a little bit about your proudest moment in conservation?
Yes, for sure. And congratulations, Violet. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that story. That's so powerful. Healing and conservation is essential. It's an essential part of the movement. My most recent was really supporting our youth delegation that attended the Native Youth Climate Adaptation and Leadership Congress in West Virginia this year. It was our first time participating from the Mariana Islands. And to see our youth engaged and asking questions to leaders in America, like Secretary Deb Haaland from the US Department of the Interior, was amazing. I can see how the work that we do is inspiring the next generation, and they are a key part of the movement of expanding our voice, because we really are keepers of the land and the ocean, and we are stewards for them.
Well, Violet and Sheila, I want to thank you very much for your powerful words and for sharing a little bit about your life and some of the work that you've done. This has been our first episode of Under the Pala Pala, and it's time for us to go back to work. We're going to come back every couple of weeks, and I'm going to introduce you to other conservation leaders who are working across the United States.